What is included in a press release? So a press release, for those of you who don't know, is a written statement that is issued to the media to share information about a newsworthy event, a product, or a service. I have a whole soapbox when it comes to press releases. I would prefer that you spend your time pitching versus creating a press release and hoping that that is what generates the media. But a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, creating a press release in addition to already pitching the media is part of their protocols. So if that is the case, here's what you'll want to include. You'll want to start with a strong headline that captures the essence of your story. You'll also want to include in the first paragraph, you'll want to provide an overview of the event or the announcement, including who, what, when, where, and why. And you want to follow this with a couple paragraphs, depending on how much information, and provide more detail and more context. You also want to include quotes from relevant sources. Now, you'll want to include, depending again on the length, maybe one, maybe two quotes. More than that, it's really hard to not completely split the interest if you have more quotes than that. Then next, you'll want to keep in mind that the language, you'll want to keep it concise. You'll want it to be free of jargon that is industry specific. You'll want to use short paragraphs. You'll want to use bullet points to make the information easy to scan. Brevity, the ability for a journalist to quickly see what the story is about is going to be in your favor. And then next, you'll want to include contact information for the person or the organization issuing the press release. Maybe that's you, as well as any relevant links or attachments. Attachments and could be photos if it's a product. If it's about a thought leader or an executive, you might want to include a headshot of them. Relevant links if it's about a new discovery, you could include a link to a white paper, for example. Next, you'll want to include you'll want to double check for spelling and grammar errors before sending the press release to journalists or posting online, obviously. Now, other tips, press releases should generally be about 400 to 500 words. I wouldn't make it too long, but I also wouldn't make it too short. Be sure to use up that space. Now, we use AP style, which is Associated Press style, and this is a set of editorial guidelines used by journalists and writers, which ensures consistency and clarity in news writing. And if you use AP style, then maybe you can up the chances of a journalist doing a reprint of your press release, which is better than nothing. It's also important to keep your press release concise and to the point. As journalists and editors are often pressed for time, they may not read beyond the first paragraph if they don't find the information relevant or interesting. So that first paragraph, again, it includes an overview of the event or the announcement, the who, what, when, where, and why. And then in addition to the main body of the press release, it's also a good idea to include a quote from a relevant source such as the CEO or an expert in the field, and this adds credibility and depth to your story. And a lot of times we on the PR team will craft what we think that quote should look like and provide that to whoever we would like to attribute it to and allow them. That's a good jumping off point for them versus trying to say, hey, come up with a quote for this. We will generally create something that they can look at and be like, yep, that looks good, or let's switch this to here. And remember, the goal of a press release is to grab the attention of journalists and entice them to cover your story. So you're putting it out into a marketplace of journalists. You're not getting media just from the press release, but you are trying to entice journalists to look at the story. So keep it concise, keep it relevant, and you can increase your chances of your press release being picked up and shared with a wider audience.